Hello friends! Today our topic is quite serious, even though at first glance it might seem very specialized. It might seem like some environmental schemes, some subsidies, Polish farmers once again arguing with the Minister of Agriculture. Another round of rhetoric around the agreement with Mercosur. Come on, people are just working their land, their subsidies are being cut. What does that have to do with us? But here, as one wise man once said, lies the most interesting part. Because behind the specific question of how many points a farmer will get for properly handling a manure pile or for refusing deep plowing, there stands a colossal, profound systemic problem. This is the problem of how a complex, centuries-old economic organism tries to survive under conditions where abstract bureaucratic schemes are imposed on it. Schemes that are completely disconnected from realities on the ground. Let's break it down step by step, starting with the facts. Because, let's be honest, the news coming in is quite alarming. So friends, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Yes, I almost forgot. Huge thanks to everyone who takes a couple of seconds for these simple actions. I really appreciate your support. So here we have a warning signal coming from the Wielkopolska Agricultural Chamber, the Wielkopolska Izba Rolnicza, or WIR as we'll call it. They sent a strong protest to the National Council of Agricultural Chambers regarding the changes planned by the ministry in the so-called eco schemes. To put it in simple terms, here's the point. The European Union has what's called a common agricultural policy. Its current financial period is set for 7 years, and as you can imagine, it ends exactly in 2027, which is coming very soon. And now, just a year before the finish line, at the very end of the 7-year contract, strategists in Brussels and Warsaw decide to suddenly rewrite the rules of the game. Some of the eco schemes. So what is an eco scheme? It's a special environmental practice for which farmers receive subsidies if they comply. That's it. Some eco schemes are removed entirely, while others have reduced scoring. And the Polish farmer, who in all previous years as a dutiful citizen tightened his belt, she took out loans from banks, bought special expensive equipment for low-impact tillage, and implemented so-called integrated crop production. He suddenly woke up and realized that the minimum score threshold for receiving subsidies was becoming almost unattainable for him. We'd already purchased the equipment, taken out loans, and switched production methods. And the crop rotation for the 2026 to 2027 season has already been planned. But what about the officials? The Ministry of Agriculture? They just shrug and say the rules changed, the budget's cut, and there's no money. But hang in there, as they say. And it would be one thing if this only affected farmers from Greater Poland. At the same time, in the Polish media space, for example on the air of Radio On Anet, the former Minister of Agriculture of Poland, now the chairman of the Agricultural Council, is speaking. Mr. Jan Krzysztof Ordanowski. And Ordanowski says even harsher things, and not straightforward ones. He calls what is happening the destruction of national production. Well, now you'll understand, friends, because we're going to start connecting these 2 points into one logical chain. And now the most interesting part begins. What do we see from the point of view of historical development and logic? The European Union was built for decades on the idea of subsidizing its own farmers. It was a complex, expensive, but effective system. The European Union supported its own farmers to guarantee food security and, of course, social stability in the countryside. Without it, nothing would work. It was an honest, or at least relatively honest, agreement between the state and the producer. The farmer takes on high environmental and sanitary standards, and in return receives a guarantee. His products will be bought, and his costs will be partially compensated from the budget. There was such an agreement. And what is happening before our eyes now? We are entering a fundamental shift. On one hand, European bureaucracy, through various mechanisms like the Green Deal, the famous Green Course, the Green Pact, and those very eco schemes, is starting to impose more and more strict and costly requirements on the farmer. Well, the farmer, especially the Polish one, will say that they are astronomically expensive. Want a subsidy? Then you have to invest in equipment for precise liquid fertilizer application. Switch to no-till farming. Get an environmental certificate, and so on. The farmer takes out loans, yes, if he doesn't have a few million zlotys of his own, and buys all this equipment from major machinery manufacturers. Let's make a note of this point, we'll need it later. And when the infrastructure is in place and the farmer is on the hook to lenders, the rules suddenly change. Subsidies are cut, scores are lowered, and they stop supporting certificates for integrated production, saying, well, you see, your consumer recognition here is low. Excuse me, but who was supposed to handle the advertising and promotion of the state ecological standard? The farmer again? He stands behind his plow all day, and in the evening, instead of raising his child, he also has to do advertising on the internet? But that's only one side of the coin. Friends, the other side is even more interesting. At the very same time, when European and especially Polish farmers are being squeezed, subsidies are being reduced, and they're required to maintain perfect environmental cleanliness for every head of cabbage, the European Union is pushing forward a free trade agreement with the Mercosur bloc, that is Latin America, and at the same time opens the gates for duty-free or preferential imports from other countries that are not part of the Union. And here, in my opinion, if you put aside sympathies and antipathies, I think Ordanovsky is right when he points out the colossal, blatant hypocrisy of the system. Because look at the picture that emerges. A Polish or German farmer is told, you can't use these fertilizers. You must buy expensive equipment and follow strict regulations so you don't end up killing everyone. Or we won't give you the extra payment. And at the same time, millions of tons of agricultural products from South America or Ukraine are brought to the market, where there are suspicions that these Euro standards are hardly followed at all. There, you can use pesticides that have long been banned in Europe. The environmental requirements are different, and the cost structure is fundamentally different. So the question is, who actually benefits from this scheme? Maybe it's the ordinary Latin American peasant, or the Ukrainian farmer, or the European consumer? Well, friends, this brings us to the very root of the problem. And for this, you don't even need to open Karl Marx Capital. It's enough just to look at the structure of the global agricultural market. Mr. Rodonovsky recalls the so-called ABCD quartet, which are the largest transnational corporations. Archer, with your permission, I'll read it out loud. Sorry for my English. Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill and Louis Dreyfus, plus the Swiss and European traders associated with them. These are the global giants that have agriculture in South America in a stranglehold. There is no family farming there, which Europe used to be so proud of. There are huge latifundia there, either directly owned by transnational funds or deeply indebted to them. And what is the result? Transnational agribusiness gets the opportunity to sell ultra-cheap products in Europe, which are produced without European environmental costs. Financial capital and the banking sector profit twice. First, they give loans to European farmers to buy expensive equipment because environmental standards have to be met, right? And then, when the impoverished farmer goes bankrupt, through bankruptcy proceedings, what do you think happens? Of course, they take his land. The European official boasts about the green transition, claiming to fight for the environment, but actually harms his own production base. And Mr. Ardanowski directly warns about the scenario that awaits Poland if everything continues in the same way. Medium and large commercial farms, meaning those with 50 hectares or more, the very ones that provided real food for an independent country, that invested in modernization, are now facing the threat of complete bankruptcy. They have taken out loans. They did so on the promise of long-term 7-year programs. But now the rules have changed. Subsidies have been cut and their prices are being undercut by dumping imports. So what do we have as a result? Court bailiffs, known as komornicy, will begin seizing Polish farmers' lands for debts. After that, these plots will be auctioned off to international investment funds and large holdings, not to just anyone. Who else would even need them, really, besides them? And the farmer himself will either become a laborer on his former land, or leave everything behind and join the ranks of the urban unemployed. And now, friends, we come to the main point, the systemic conclusion that this whole story with the farmers clearly demonstrates. The talk about cheap food from abroad, which Brussels officials try and have tried to use to reassure the urban citizen, is a very complicated illusion. Products from Mercosur countries or other regions will only be cheap as long as they are destroying the local European producer. As soon as family farms and state-owned farms in Poland, France, Germany and Hungary finally go bankrupt and leave the market, the monopoly will end up in the hands of the same 3 or 4 transnational corporations. And after that, prices will skyrocket. And it won't be some Warsaw ministry dictating terms, but rather, let's say, a boardroom in Chicago or Rotterdam, wherever they are based. Therefore, when the Greater Poland Agricultural Chamber says the principle of stability and predictability has been violated, they are actually expressing and formulating not just the selfish interests of some individual Polish farmers. They are noting the breakdown of the social contract that once existed. The state, represented by bureaucracy, is abandoning its role of protecting its own producers and citizens in Poland in favor of global agribusiness. And the situation where the appeals of farmers' unions, as Ardanowski puts it, are like talking to a brick wall, is not an accidental system failure. This shows whom they serve. And these institutions serve them today. That's the picture we get. As we can see, behind every seemingly boring document about reducing payments for moderate fertilizer use in 2027, there is actually a tough struggle going on. It's an uncompromising fight for land, for resources, and ultimately for who will control what's on your plate. So that's the reality we live in. I hope you found it interesting. Leave a like, write a comment, take care of yourself and your loved ones. Big shout out to the working class, to turners, milling machine operators, submariners, seamstresses, mechanics too, carpenters, computer guys. If I missed anyone, let me know in the comments. Alright, that's all for now. See you next time.